I was sick and tired of hearing all of this crazy talk and every person feeling persecuted for something that someone else did. Those weren't the leaders that we had. And so I was just, I was tired of the noise. And so finally, we just got to a place where we were empowering our leaders to take control back of the talent on their teams. I'm like, listen, you have to separate the two. And once we separate the two and you can show people that you are allowing yourselves to be vulnerable as human beings and you're restoring the stability within your own personal journeys and you're telling the truth, because that's one of the things we also do is we stand behind our own truth, is that, listen, I want to have a conversation about this, but I'm winging it. I'm trying. Start there. And when leaders were doing that, people started leaning in and people started going, that's all I wanted was just to have a
Yeah.
conversation.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast. Today I'm joined by Jen Mahone-Rightler, who's a Global Chief Diversity Officer and Senior Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility and Wellness at Epsilon. In the episode, Jennifer shares her personal diversity and inclusion story and how it shaped her approach to life, leadership, and the creation of Epsilon's 5-pillar diversity leadership model and what it really means to be an inclusive workplace. As always, before we jump into the video, make sure you hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. With that being said, let's jump in. Welcome to the show, Jen. How are you?
I'm good, Chris. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm good. I managed to go away on holiday for the first time in 4 years. So,
that's 4 years. That's a long time.
I know my wife's now a little bit more happier with me, which is always... I feel like I just went away, basically. I was like, for my marriage, I needed a holiday. I was like, if I make another excuse this year of why we can't go away, then I'm going to be in trouble. So yeah, we managed to get away to Italy for a few weeks. Also, one of our first family holidays with Robin, because obviously the first 2 years of her life, she's 3 years old. The first 2 years of her life was lockdown, you know. So never really got to go away anywhere. So that was nice. As well. But yeah, what about you? Did you manage to get away?
You know what? We take mini vacations. And so we took a vacation 4th of July. So my birthday falls in that weekend. And so we went to go see our son in DC. And so we take mini breaks. So
probably smarter, because when you do it when everyone else does, it's just chaos. It's so busy. Everywhere that you go, no matter where you go, I was like, I can't even breathe. There's so many people around in Italy, in where we went in Florence. I was like, oh my God, maybe we should come here like a different time of year so we can enjoy it a bit more, because it's just so much tourism during that time.
Yeah, and so we try to take. So our son is in medical school, and so it works out that his vacations happen off holidays.
Oh.
So it works, and so wherever we go on vacation, we end up taking him with us. So it just works for us. So yeah, we were able to get away a little bit too.
Yeah. And for our listeners, you've moved recently, right?
Yes. 3 weeks. 3 weeks.
How are you settling in to Texas?
I went to school here. So it's nice to be back. It's nice to be back in the state. It's hot. It's really hot.
That's the first thing everyone says about Texas. It's hot. Yeah.
I thought South Carolina was hot, but there's something about this Texas heat. It's ridiculous, but it's okay. But it's ridiculous. But I mean, it's good to be here. It's good to be here. I mean, I'm here. My leader is here. There's a lot of our colleagues are here from our HR team. So it feels really good.
It's a good move. It's interesting because everyone I follow a lot of comedians and others, and everyone seems to be going to Texas. Like a mass migration from every other state to Texas.
Yeah.
Have you heard about that, or is it just me, what I'm listening to?
No, a lot of people are moving here, especially to Austin.
Yes.
A lot of people moving to Austin. There are a lot of people moving to Frisco, like the PGA is moving to Frisco, is my understanding. There's a lot of people moving to Texas. I mean, I've been trying to move for the last year and a half, and Like the housing market here was ridiculous. We were trying to buy a house for the last year and a half. It was bananas. Like,
Crazy.
honestly, I gave up for 6 months. I'm like, I'm not looking for a house anymore. It was crazy.
Well, you're in now. You're in. You're settled. It's all good. Let's go back for a second before we go forward. Tell everyone a little bit more about your journey to the role you're in now. You're obviously leading your global D&I, and also along with that, you've got the CSR, you've got the wellness.
Yeah.
I don't even know how we have time to even speak to you, to be honest, with all of those roles. And being a mom, and being a wife, and having time for you. I don't know how you do it, if I'm being honest.
Oh my gosh. I think so. The journey has definitely been just that. It's a journey, right? So I've been in D&I. I think I wanted to say it selected me. I come from a family of servant leaders. It started when I was little. I come from Kenosha, Wisconsin, this little itty bitty town in the Midwest. My family was, I was raised by my grandparents, and they were the first African American family to own a deed in the state of Wisconsin. And so,
Oh,
yeah, and so it's just, it kind of happened. I mean, my grandparents were activists. My grandmother was one of the first African Americans to be on like the PTA, and she was one of the first people, black women, to run for the school board. And it was just, she always fought for people's rights. And so it just kind of happened organically, I think. And when you're a kid and you sit and you watch that, you don't really know anything differently. And so when I was about 6 years old, we lived in a community that was predominantly white, and the KKK came and burnt a cross in our front yard in the middle of the night.
no
And
way.
yeah, and it was weird because at 6 years old, you don't really know what's really going on. There was just all this chaos that was kind of happening in the house, and she came upstairs, got all the kids, and so I have um, uncles and aunts that are in the house. My brother and I were raised by my grandparents, so there's 9 kids all together. But you come downstairs and we come outside, and my grandfather is literally standing outside on the porch with his gun, basically protecting the family and protecting his house. And
Crazy.
it was crazy. It was just mad chaos. And the next day, you have just, if you can imagine what the scene looks like, there's this thing in the front yard, there's people from the neighborhood all around, and they're talking to all of their kids, really trying to explain to them what's really taking place and what has happened the night before. And it, I think in their minds, it was, they had a decision to make around how do we raise our children? And they could have either chosen the route of hate, or they could have chosen the route of love. And they chose the route of love. And it is very simple in our house, is that there are going to be people, they're going to judge you based on what you look like, and that is their problem to figure out. It is not yours. And you need to combat that with love
Mm.
and keep it open. And that's just how we were raised. And so from that point on, it was just, they always just fought for what is right and to make sure that everyone had a voice and to do right by others, regardless of what they look like. And that's just how the journey, I think, for me started. And I always had to be the tag along. Like, I was the youngest of the group. So wherever she went, I had to go with her. I didn't have a choice. I had to go to board meetings with her. I had to always, and I was always listening, always listening. So I'm deaf in one ear. And so I fidgeted a lot. And so I would have to go with her to these meetings, and she would make me sit on my hands so I wouldn't fidget. It was brutal and I hated it, but I am definitely thankful for it now. But I would have to pay attention because she would ask me and grill me on the way home, like, so what did we talk about in my meeting? And I would
Oh,
have to
wow.
repeat what they would talk about because she wanted me to pay attention, because she didn't want me to have special attention. Like, I never had special ed. I never went to training or any of that because she didn't want me to have to sit in the front of the class. She would tell the teachers to put me in the back of the class so that I would be forced to listen.
Really?
And yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. So that's where the journey really started.
And
And
that
I
was your
just,
grandma, by the way, you're referring to when you say she.
yeah,
What would you
my grand
say? What would you say is the main lessons that you learned from your grandma that have stuck with you throughout your whole career?
resilience. I would say resilience, accountability, and it was always extending grace.
Mm. Back to your point, you could choose hate or love,
Hmm.
and choosing hate is it's damaging yourself, right? It's a lot to hold on to, you know. In many ways, if you choose hate, they win.
Exactly. They always win when you choose hate. And
Mm.
I think the other part of it too, with her, it was she came up in an environment too back then, she was a working mom too, when women weren't supposed to have a job back then. And she was raising seven of her own children, and then she raised my mother, she raised her two kids. And I mean, she was just amazing. I mean, my grandmother was just, she was an icon in the community. And I would say that even when the chips were down, she always looked for the positive.
Mm.
And I think when I look back to some of the things that she went through, and I think about today, nothing, a lot really hasn't changed. It's just repeating itself.
Really?
Yeah, but different circumstances, but it's the same story, right? It's the same story.
Because what
Same.
you've described, and many people listening might be shocked, but this isn't that long ago.
No.
People have got a short memory.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
This isn't
It
that
was
long
not
ago.
that long ago.
Mm. It's
No,
Yeah.
and that's the part that's sad. So, we're out here, and so you have to ask yourself, what are we actually fighting for? And then what are we solving for? Because there's a difference. And I think that's the question that I pose to a lot of people. So when you think about social justice versus what we're doing in our corporate offices, there are differences. And so you think about social justice externally, and then you think about diversity, equity, inclusion internally. They're two different stories. And I think sometimes the lines get blurred. And so when I look at what my grandparents were doing, they were doing community outreach and community justice so that they could get to a place so that their children and everyone else's children could just get opportunities, where now in the corporate realm, we're all trying to fight for the same things. But then externally, everyone seems to think that we're fighting for, you know, the Black experience, the white experience. There's all these different experiences, and it has become just a divided nation.
Yeah. It's so interesting how your upbringing and environment shapes your worldview. Because,
Hmm.
I grew up in a very multicultural environment in East London where there was two white kids in the class and everyone else was either black or Asian
Yeah.
or Indian. And that's just normal to me because that's where
Hmm.
I grew up. So I didn't really experience or see racism because everyone was just so accepting of each other because we grew up in a multicultural environment in East London. So there was so many different cultures, and it was what it was. And interesting enough, unfortunately enough, the first time I really experienced racism was when I came into the workplace.
Hmm.
And because I was like, and I remember walking on, for example, onto the sales floor for the first time, and it was just hundreds of just white males, and it was the opposite of my college or class. So I was like, whoa, every, I was like, what? It really took me back. Like it took me a few seconds and be like, whoa, where's, what's happened? It was so obvious. Like you could actually see it. I wish I could take a photo of it. It'd just be like, what? Well, like this is, it was just I don't think they even realized, or maybe they did realize, But everything that made me me, for example, because I had an accent, an East London accent, they're like, you can't talk like that. What do you mean? You have to talk like this. You know, here's the Financial Times. Make sure you read it every day and educate yourself because you grew up in a poor area, literally. And everything about Chris and my diverse background and experiences, they're like, strip that away. This is who you are now. And it was really sad. And then I heard, you know, very racist remarks and comments, and none of those people knew I had a black girlfriend who's now my wife, and they would make horrific comments, and they have no idea that all of my friends and I'm sitting there like, and this is my leadership team, you know, they're laughing with me, trying to get me in on the joke, and I'm just like horrified, like, wow, this is, and so it was kind of a opposite effect of my whole childhood. I'd kind of grown up and everyone had embraced the different cultures, and I used to go to my friend's house and have my curry goat and rice. And I used to go to my other friend's house and have, like, you know, it was just so cool. Like, everyone was just, and then I went to the workplace and I was like, or I thought it'd be even more accepting. And I was like, whoa. And even one of my friend Collins, he was one of the first black males that they hired. He started talking differently and acted differently. And I was like, Colin, why are you talking that way? He's like, I have to. And I never understood it. And he was like, and his last name's Ennis. And I was like, oh, today you're white Ennis. It was like a joke we had between us. And he was like, and he was like, yeah, I know. And I didn't realize the impact it had. It's similar to my wife. My wife tells me a similar story, how, you know, when she's giving feedback, she kind of sounds different on the phone because she doesn't want to come across as that aggressive black woman. And I was like, whoa, okay. I started seeing these things take place around me, and I was like, oh, this is what people are talking about as well. I know you're nodding, you can relate to a lot of this. I still hear it now. Whenever my wife answers the phone at home, I'm like, who is that person answering the phone? Because that is not my wife. She's like, I don't even know I'm doing it. I've just been doing it so long that this is just how I speak when I speak to my boss or I speak to a client. I'm like, wow, okay, because I don't do that. As a white male, I've never had to try and pretend to be or anything else and worried about being judged. So it's really close to home, obviously, because of my family and friends. And I think others just take for granted. They don't even see that. And the energy that takes to...
It definitely takes it definitely takes a toll. I think, so my circumstance is a little bit different. So my family is very multiracial. So if you look out, there's 9 of us. And so there's 9 kids. Out of all of the kids, there's 24, 25 grandchildren. Out of all of the grandchildren, only 3 have 2 sets of black parents. All the rest of them are biracial, including my son. So my husband's white. And it's interesting. I mean, we grew up, I went to Catholic school, and I was one of 2 black girls in my graduating class. It's just where we went to school. And so, but keep in mind, I grew up in an era where I was the 5th living generation. So I knew my great grandmother. She was alive. She lived to be 103.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it's kind of cool. So I have that history, but she was the daughter of a slave. And so grammar and English is very important. And so that was something that was just really laid in stone for us. Like, we had to read every day. We had to read books. It was very important for my grandparents, for all of their children to speak a certain way because of what you just described.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And so when we went to school, people wouldn't think any differently of how I talked. I didn't realize what racism really was for a long time. Even me going to this all-white school, I didn't get treated any differently. I really didn't. My friends were awesome. The first time that I recognized racism was when it was on a personal level, is when something happened with my mom. So my mom went to jail. It hit the newspapers. My brother and I had to come back to school. And that's when I realized it.
Okay.
That's what happened. And so when that happened, that's when I realized who my real friends were versus who my real friends weren't.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, as you can imagine, oh, the whispers kind of happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it was clear, it was made very, very clear to me at that point how cruel and evil people can be. But even then, I recognized who my real friends were. And to this day, I still have those same friends 30 plus years later. But then when you look at when you come into the workforce, I mean, there have been times where I have been on the phone and I've interviewed with people, and then I show up and I tell people who I am, and they're like, "You're not Jen
Oh,
Mahone. You're
no.
not her." And I'm like, "Yes, I am."
They have
And
no,
then,
they have no
oh,
idea. They have no idea how bad.
no idea.
they
They have no idea.
have no
No.
idea.
And it's interesting, and it's interesting. And so, we have a long way to go, is what I will say. And do I think that we have? I think when you think about where we started to where we're at, I think we've made minimal, marginal progress.
Yeah. Even for me, I'm not that old, but like I remember when me and Natasha have been together since we were 17. I'm 35
Mm-hmm.
right now. And even back then, interracial relationships weren't as common. And
Yeah.
I remember, I remember even meeting Tasha's family for the first time, and her granddad was very upset that she brought home a white man, and
Yep.
he didn't talk to me for the first 5 years of our
Wow.
relationship. I'm talking, I would go there every Sunday for Sunday dinner, and he just, I didn't exist. He would walk past me, he wouldn't talk to me. He was very stubborn. Her nan was amazing. She was great. Her nan was like a lovely woman. She was like she's always trying to feed me to death. You need to put on more weight. You're too skinny. That's the typical conversation when I got there. But the grand didn't talk to me for. I tried, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, like 5 years. I think 5 years later, I wore him down, and all of a sudden, we're sitting there one day. He's watching the football, and he just turns to me and just starts talking to me, like nothing, like as if as if the last 5 years didn't exist, as well. And I think he realized that obviously I had the best intentions, and I wasn't going anywhere. And then we had an amazing relationship for the 5 or 6 years before he passed away, unfortunately, as well. But me and Tasha have experienced that along the way of like older white women getting annoyed and angry. I've been on the train and transport multiple times where an elder normally it's the younger generation don't care, they're like whatever. It's the older generation who would make sly comments, or even older black men or women will like kiss their teeth when they see me and Tasha together, and we had to deal with all those things along the way. Or even recently, and I wish I shouldn't smile about this, it was awful, when I went to pick up Robin from nursery. And they didn't think that I was Robin's dad because someone was new, and vice versa. Natasha's gone to pick up Robin, and Robin's very light, and they've been like, "I need to check." She's like, "What do you mean? It's my daughter." And they're like, "Oh," and like she had to prove to the nursery that she's Robin's mum because Robin has light skin and she's black, and they don't believe her, which is crazy. And I remember Tasha was so upset. She was come home crying. I was like, "What's the matter?" She was like, "They didn't want to give me Robin, from the nursery." And I was like, what? Like these are things that happen every day that people don't even realize.
A lot. Like that happened to me. I used to carry around Ian's birth certificate with me
Really?
for years.
It's the fact that you even have to think about that, right? That's the fact that,
for years. Because
just in
he
case.
was so light. He was light. He was very, very light, and he had crystal blue eyes.
Oh yeah, cool. Even yeah, So you were like, I'm carrying this around. You never know. It's
And I
crazy.
used to carry it around because I was tired of people questioning. They thought I was his nanny for the longest time.
Tasha's had that one, by the way. She had,
Yeah.
oh, she's
And
so cute. Oh, and they turned to Natasha. Oh, so you're the nanny? She's like, what? No, that's the one that happened a lot when Robin was a baby. A lot. Tasha would come home really upset. That happened so many times. The nanny
yeah,
comment. Yeah.
yeah, I just wasn't going to deal with it anymore. And I think that was one of the reasons why when and you fast forward, like his dad would go and pick him up, no question. I would come and pick him up and I got questioned all the time. I picked him up one time, and I've always been a working mom, always. And I was never like the room mom. I was never the mom, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I was always a working mom. And
Yeah.
I was never the mom that would go to school and, hang out at the school all day and bring in the treats. I was never that mom because I was always working. But one day I got off work early and I went to pick him up and he came outside and he was looking for my grandfather, but I decided to pick him up. And I went and he saw me and he was super excited and he started to run towards me. And mind you, my grandfather was very fair complected. And he started to run towards me and the teacher assistant grabbed him and said, where are you going? And he's like, that's my mom. And she's like, that's impossible. That's impossible. That's a Black lady. So I walked and I said, Ian, let's go. And she said, I'm sorry, but if you don't leave the premises, I'm going to call the police.
No way.
I said, please do. I said, please, I want you to. And I said, because you will be so embarrassed when they get here. I'm like, this is ridiculous. And so Ian is sitting there looking at her like, you're going to call the police on my mom?
Yeah. Can you imagine how confusing that is to a child?
Yeah. And I think it is just the lack of just asking a question and making assumptions. And so I think when people make assumptions, and I think that's half the challenge that I think we have just in the worldview is simply ask a question. And I think that's one of the learnings I think that we have found, even in my current role, is where I think we've made so much progress, even at Epsilon, is that we've created this environment that we have made it easy for people just to have a conversation. Just about starting a conversation and not feeling like they're going to get attacked because they just simply ask a question.
Yeah.
I would rather someone just ask a question. Like I remember being in school and my friends were always curious about how come you can't have ever do a sleepover? And I said, because culturally, I said, my grandparents don't believe in that. Well, why? I'm like, because they don't think that, they don't know your family like that. And I said, and, let me explain historically what happens, right? And so you got to give them this history lesson. And
it's so interesting you say that, by the way. I never really thought about that, but my Black friends never had sleepovers.
No.
And they would all come and stay at our houses, like the white. I never even thought about that until this day, until you just said that.
Yeah. And so when I would explain it, they were like, oh, right. And it's funny because we would have to explain things like that. And, and so as we had kids, I didn't do that. Like Ian could sleep over, Ian could go different places, but I do remember he had to we would map out all these rules for him. And I just remember he would go to sleep over at kids' houses and stuff. But if he was uncomfortable, you pick up a phone, you call, and we're coming home, we're coming to get you. Mm-hmm. And, but we had standards. And so it's just interesting. But the one thing I do remember is as a kid is I always told my friends, just ask a question so we can talk it out. Just talk about it. Otherwise, you're never going to know. You're never going to know.
Yeah. For our audience, so that they want to definitely touch upon this because we spoke about it before. Walk everyone through how this then everything we've discussed has then influenced your Epsilon diversity leadership model and the core pillars that you put together, because all of what we've really discussed weaves into that.
Yeah. So we have a leadership model. The leadership model for me really kind of stemmed from when I first got the role. It was really important for our then CEO and our CEO and um, our chief human resource officer to have a strategy that really matched our culture. They didn't want someone to come in and just say, this is what we're doing, and you know, and you're going to follow this kind of roadmap. And that's not even how I lead as a leader. I wanted to get to know our leaders. I wanted to meet the leaders where they were at, because otherwise it wasn't going to work. So we did a 2-day strategy session where we brought in Deloitte and we worked with Deloitte. And then during that strategy session, what kind of like hit home was we had a lot of leaders say, Jen, what does success really look like? And do we have a model? Do you have a model that kind of tells us like what it should be? And it just kept resonating. A model. We have leadership models for everything, right? We have leadership models for success. We have leadership models for this. And I said, I'm just going to put together a diversity leadership model based on the core things that I heard that came out of those 2 days that we were together. So the leadership model is it's 5 pillars. It's we serve with heart. We have we create a client shared value system. We lead with courage and passion. We build strength on strength, and then we raise the game. And so when you think about we serve with heart, it is we show up being our true authentic selves. So it is all about we serve the people that you lead. And so that resonates with people are our biggest asset, because without people, we don't have anything. And, you know, for Epsilon, it is people first. So that's really important for us. When we think about our clients, one of the things that was really important for me within my responsibility, I also own our client diversity engagement. So when we go and talk to clients, I want clients to understand how important inclusion is. And so ask the client, what are you guys doing when it comes to diversity? It's not just about the money. It can't always be about the money, but what are you doing for your culture and your people? And we have to have a like-minded, collaboration. It can't get them thinking differently about what matters. And so what we have found and what research has found is that clients also have choices too. And if you start talking to them about inclusion, it's letting them know that it's not just about the money. It's also around what are you doing for your people? And so the client shared value system is about this commitment to shared success where the foundation starts and ends with inclusion. And so that's important. And then we lead with courage and passion. So it's listening first, it's acting second. And then building strength on strength. And it's really around the results matter. I mean, we're a data company, data marketing. So, the results do matter. And so we focus on that. And then lastly, it's always about raising the game, and it's challenging yourself and then challenging each other.
Mm-hmm. How are you? I love it, first and foremost. And I love that you put that together and something the leadership team can connect to. What was the sort of challenge were there any challenges that popped up when you approached the leadership team? And I suppose, how do you hold them accountable, I suppose is what I'm getting to. How do you hold them accountable to these core pillars?
So there really weren't a lot of challenges. I think people find it fascinating that I wasn't really faced with a lot of challenges when I started the role. I think the biggest challenge was I came in after the world really blew up after
Literally
the George.
middle of the, yeah.
I came in the middle of COVID, and I came in after the George Floyd murder. So I think the biggest challenge was everyone thought I was going to come in and take this approach of I was just going to lay down this law, and I didn't do that. That's not who I am. And so when they recognized that that's not who I was, it was like, oh, she has a different approach. So the challenge really was really just building the trust, and it was just letting people get to know who I was, and um, listening. And so I wouldn't say it was really more a challenge. I would say it's just time wasn't on our side was the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we recalibrate and build the foundation, because the world was crazy, and you were competing with the noise.
So
And
much
so
noise.
yeah, and there was so much noise, and it was playing in the background. And when we were trying to make a step forward, you kept hearing all this other stuff. And so I was trying to play defense, but then driving offense. And so, um, and it just got to a point where I'm like, we're not doing anything for right now. We're just going to lay down the foundation in the background. And then as far as accountability, I would say that it was meeting people where they were at and really getting people grounded in tell me what your comfort level is, and that's where we'll start. And then focusing there. And so we had leaders who just raised their hand and said, I'm ready. And I worked with them. And so as we worked with those leaders and those leaders started to get progress and see results, more leaders started to say, oh, if that leader's getting those kind of results, then I want in. I want to try it. And that's how we started. And then I think as they started to see how we were really making progress and it wasn't that bad, right? It was.
They're so worried about, saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, etc., etc. They're like, oh, isn't this the scary thing that I thought it would be?
Yeah, and I said it's okay to say the wrong thing. What was I had to get people to understand, allow yourself the grace for things to not be okay. And I'm going to be right there to catch you if you do. And I was telling our associates, back off, back off. Like I was standing in front and taking the bullets in the front line, and I was empowering our leaders, take control of your teams back. We are going into 2021. You are not awful people. This is not about, you did not pull a trigger. This is not what this is not that. And I was sick and tired of hearing all of this crazy talk and every person feeling persecuted for something that someone else did. Those weren't the leaders that we had. And so I was just I was tired of the noise. And so finally we just got to a place where we were empowering our leaders to take control back of the talent on their teams. I'm like, listen, you have to separate the two. And once we separate the two and you can show people that you are allowing yourselves to be vulnerable as human beings and you're restoring the stability within your own personal journeys and you're telling the truth, because that's one of the things we also do is we stand behind our own truth, is that, listen, I want to have a conversation about this, but I'm winging it. I'm trying. Start there. And when leaders were doing that, people started leaning in and people started going, that's all I wanted was just to have a
Yeah.
conversation.
Don't have to have all the answers, right? That's the thing. We're so worried about not opening up the conversation because we're worried that we don't have the answer. You don't have to have the answer, right? And that's even more authentic. It's even
Yeah.
more, people are more likely to open up. They're like, oh, okay. Yeah. From a practical sense, was this, there's no easy way of doing it. Were you just sitting down one-on-one with every one of these leaders? Like, how did you go about doing that? Was it literally that there's no easy way of doing this?
One-on-one. one-on-one. I mean, I will tell you that 2021 was a long year for me and a long year for some of our HR business partners. I mean, I traveled a lot in 2021,
Yeah,
and a
there's
lot
no
of people don't.
shortcuts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm committed to what I signed up for. I had the support of our very top leaders of the organization, and but it was one-on-one. It was our leaders who were raising their hands, flying their leaders to the locations that we were selecting, and us spending sometimes 2 and 3 days in those offices and doing culture transformations and figuring it out. And so it was spending a lot of one-on-one time, and we have the results that we can stand behind to say we are moving the needle. And now it is just happening across our top 35 leaders. We've committed to getting all of their teams and flowing it down. And so it's working. I mean, a lot of people don't agree with my approach, and that's okay, but that's why it's Epsilon's way. It's not the world's way.
Yeah,
And so that's what makes us unique.
100%. What's been the feedback you're hearing from the employee population?
The biggest compliment that I think that we get is when I meet new people and they say, "Oh my God, we go online and we see the videos that you're doing around diversity and we hear about the diversity. We're here because of the diversity journey that you're taking."
That's cool. That's one of the reasons that they joined
Yep.
the
Yep.
business, or continue to stay at
Or
that.
continue to say, and we hear from people who've been here for a while that were very uncertain about my role. And they're like, this is awesome. This is great. I love the approach that we're taking. You have people that I knew that I even was like, I don't know about this one. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to change a person's perspective.
Yeah.
I, I know that I am good at my job. And even sometimes I go, I don't know about this person. And that person can come and say, Jen, this is awesome. And it's those people that confirm that we are doing the right things.
Yeah.
And so
How does that make you feel when you hear that from them?
it's confirmation. It's definitely confirmation. I am motivated every day. I wouldn't have moved to Texas and need the commitment to move if I didn't believe in what we were doing. And I know without a shadow of a doubt, I made the right decision to join Epsilon. And I, I'm happy, and I feel fortunate that I was the person they selected.
Yeah.
So for me, it puts a smile on my face every day to know that, we get 1% better every day, which is one of our behaviors. And that's all I can ask for. If it's one person that tells me that we've touched them and that we've impacted their life and we've changed something for them every day, I've done my job.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
it's so interesting, because one of the things I love about my job is seeing and hearing the stories like your own, and you can see everyone who's listening or watching right now that you were meant to be in this role.
Yeah.
Hearing your story, your background, the journey, the family, the influence. This role didn't even exist when you were little. Not to age you, not to age you, right? But this didn't even, not really, didn't exist.
Yeah.
But so when you say that D&I found you, I think it truly did. I think you found each other. Let's just say that.
Yeah. I think there are roles that, that pick you, and then, and then there are roles that find you. And yeah, the role definitely found me. And I think in a real world, if you think about what's next and where the journey continues, it's we work to get us to a point, when we talked the last time, where these roles don't exist anymore.
Yes.
So that it just becomes part of what we do. And people think I'm crazy when I say that, but if we are really trying to do what's right for the world, that's what we should all be fighting for.
100%.
And so to me, that's the end goal.
Yeah, you want to get to that point where, I suppose to use the example you said earlier in the episode, you should, shouldn't even have to think about walking around with a birth certificate in your handbag.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and many other versions that we've shared during the show. Listen, I feel like we had all these questions set out, but I'm so happy we just winged it and went down this journey, because I think it's so impactful and so powerful for everyone listening. And I know we've gone way over time. Before I let you go, if there's a parting piece of advice you'd give to the audience, what would that be? And where can they connect with you if they want to reach out and say hello?
So you can connect with me on LinkedIn for sure. That's probably the easiest way. And I think if I think about advice, just be yourself. And if you're coming into this space, I think I would don't coach the players, right? Let people be who they are. I would say create the best solutions for the team, regardless of who you have on the team. And make sure that you're not trying to create little versions of yourself, because then that's not inclusive. And I think what happens is that you get people coming into these roles and they think that the role is about them. This role is never about us. It's always about other people. And you're never going to be able to create solutions that actually work if it's always about you, the individual. And so, build the structure for the best solutions that are going to move the business forward. It's like a game of chess.
Yeah.
You know,
definitely.
And that's how, I mean, that's the best advice that I think I could give. I mean, it's an evolution.
Yeah.
The game is an evolution, and you can't predict it. And so don't try, but always be ready to have a strategy in place. So,
listen, I love that. And I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and experience. And I look forward to doing it again soon. And hopefully I'll come say hi to you when it's not so hot.
Exactly.
I'll come in the winter as well. But until then, I wish you all the best. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris. Same to you. Take care.
Thanks, bye.